What's up, everybody? I'm Finn McKenty. This is the Punk Rock MBA, and today we're here to talk about the bizarre rise and fall of As I Lay Dying, which is easily one of the most shocking, strange stories that I can personally remember in the 30 years or so that I've been involved in the scene. I watched As I Lay Dying start out as one of the best and brightest bands in that whole explosion of Christian metalcore bands back in the late 90s and early 2000s, where they quickly climbed to the top of the scene, eventually selling over 1 million albums, hitting the Billboard Top 10, and even earning a Grammy nomination. The band seemed like they were on top of the world, like nothing could stop them, until one day, out of the blue,
Tim Lambesis,
the frontman for the Grammy-nominated Christian heavy metal band As I Lay Dying,
is sitting in jail at this hour.
accused of doing something very much against his religion, hiring a hitman to kill his estranged wife.
I was just as shocked as everybody. It was easily the strangest story in the metal scene that I can personally remember. And in this video, I'll do my best to try to find out exactly what happened, and most importantly, ask the bigger questions. In cases like this, can we separate the art from the artist? And, should we even try? And more to the point, does Tim deserve another chance, having served his time? Or is what he did just unforgivable? I will do my best to answer all of those questions in this video. But first, if you haven't, please check me out on Twitch. I'm streaming twice a week from 4 to 7 p.m. Pacific on Tuesdays and Thursdays, and there's a link to that in the description of this video. And also, I'd like to thank Trade Coffee for sponsoring this video. I've been working with Trade Coffee for quite a while now, because as somebody who really likes small business, I love that they support so many independent companies. Trade Coffee sends you new coffees every month. You just take their quiz to find out what kind of coffee is right for you. After I did it, their coffee experts looked at my profile, ratings, and flavor preferences along with their algorithm and created this custom collection for my viewers. You'll notice that these are all decaf because I stopped drinking caffeine a while ago, and I love that they have so many options. And right now, Trade is offering new subscribers a total of $30 off your first order plus free shipping when you go to drinktrade.com/rock. Or click the link in the description below. That's more than 40 cups of coffee for free. Get started by taking their quiz at drinktrade.com/rock and let Trade find a coffee that you will love. That's drinktrade.com/rock for $30 off. In order to understand what happened, we have to start at the very beginning. As I Lay Dying started out back in 2000, founded in San Diego by their vocalist Tim Lambesis and drummer Jordan Mancino. And Tim has always been kind of the main creative driving force of the band, and so really this story is about him more than anything else. Tim Lambesis grew up in a very religious environment, going to a Christian high school where he was actually voted most like Jesus, and unlike a lot of people, it wasn't one of those situations where his parents forced him into it and he sort of went along kicking and screaming. He was, from what I can tell, a true believer. He even ended up majoring in religious studies in college, where he took it very seriously. This is someone who is not a dabbler. He really truly immersed himself in Christianity. In 2000, he formed the band with Jordan, and they recorded their first album, Beneath the Encasing of Ashes, in 2001, which was kind of along the lines of the pioneering Christian metalcore band Zao, but they quickly evolved into something much closer to their final form on their second album, Frail Words Collapse, with their sound basically picking up where In Flames left off, but adding metalcore breakdowns. And this was during the same time as the so-called new wave of American heavy metal bands were really picking up steam. Bands like Killswitch Engage, Lamb of God, Chimera, and God Forbid. And they quickly rose to the top of the metalcore scene, eventually signing with Metal Blade Records. And like Under Oath, they were one of the rare bands of that era who may have started out as a Christian band, but were just so good that they were able to bridge the gap and build a following in the secular, or in other words, non-religious scene, which was pretty rare back then. So this is a band that had two fandoms behind them. On the one hand, the Christian scene, who loved them not just for the sound of their music, but also for their beliefs. And on the other hand, the secular metalcore scene, who just liked them for their music. And so with all of that support behind them, they quickly rose to the top of the ranks and eventually hit number 8 on Billboard with the release of their 2007 album called An Ocean Between Us, touring with bands like Trivium and Disturbed, and appearing on the Mayhem Festival with legendary bands like Slipknot, Slayer, and Motorhead. By the time they released their 6th album, Awakened, in 2012, they had sold over 1 million albums, hit the Billboard Top 20 3 times, and were even nominated for a Grammy in 2008 for their song Nothing Left. To put it simply, the band was crushing it. They were on top of their genre and they showed no signs of slowing down. But all of that was about to come crashing to a halt on May 7th, 2013 at a Barnes & Noble near San Diego.
The lead singer of Grammy-nominated Christian heavy metal band As I Lay Dying was arrested earlier this week after allegedly hiring a hitman to kill his estranged wife.
Here's what was described by someone who claims to be an employee who was there at the scene. It was about 2 p.m. My buddy was outside the store doing face painting and the cops told him that he needed to stop immediately and go inside. Tim was there with a friend just browsing. I saw one special task force cop, 2 regular officers, and 2 undercover officers. They just pushed everyone aside and handcuffed him. It all happened so fast. It seemed like they were planning it out for a long time. And as the world soon found out, what had actually happened is that he had just paid an undercover cop posing as a hitman to murder his wife Megan. His specific crime was soliciting another to commit and join in commission of murder. And so of course, the first question everyone is asking is why? What in the world could possess him to do that? Well, none of us know what was actually going on inside his head, but what the court documents say is that when he was on tour, he sent his wife an email telling her that he had started seeing someone else. And in light of that, they had been separated for a few months. He felt that she was making it difficult to see the 3 children that they had adopted together, and that she was dragging out the divorce proceedings that she had initiated the previous year. And from there, the story only got darker. Tim had also gotten heavily into bodybuilding, spending hours a day at the gym, and as we later found out, he had also started using steroids. And at the gym, he would oftentimes complain about the situation with his wife to a guy at the gym named Brett. Tim says that Brett was not only a personal trainer, but also his steroid dealer, although Brett denies that part. Either way, one day Tim asked if they could meet to talk about it. And according to Tim, Brett basically encouraged him to hire a hitman to kill his wife. But Brett's version of the story is a little bit different. Brett says, he began by asking me if I knew why I was there. I made the comment that I was hoping it wasn't to kill anybody. He said that was funny, and that was exactly why I was there. Brett claims that he said he couldn't help, but Tim wouldn't let it go. He wanted to know if maybe I could find somebody to do it for him. He knew I knew people was his comment. I know you know people, so maybe you can help me. Brett says that he went to his attorney to ask for advice on how to handle the situation, who told Brett that he would be an accessory to murder if Tim eventually did have his wife killed and Brett didn't do something to stop it. So they met again at Barnes & Noble, and this time Brett recorded the conversation. Brett claims that he again tried to steer Tim away from the hitman idea, but said at the end of that conversation, when I saw that he was not veering from killing his wife, I told him that I had somebody in mind for him. Yes. And so under pressure to get Tim off his back, Brett said that he knew a hitman named Red who could do the job and that he would introduce Tim to Red. The only problem is that Red didn't actually exist. I don't know whose version of the story is correct, and I'm not quite clear on how the police became involved, but either way, somehow or another, an undercover San Diego sheriff played the part of Red and set up another meeting with Tim at the same Barnes & Noble. The cop who played Red says, I asked him to bring photographs of the individual we were talking about, and I asked him to bring the address for the individual and $1,000. The total cost of the hit was to be $20,000, which Tim agreed to. Tim also gave them the security code to the gate outside his wife's housing complex, as well as some potential dates for the hit where Tim would be with their children and therefore would have an alibi. And the whole time that Red was talking to Tim, he was trying to get Tim to use the words kill or dead during the conversation, which again, he was recording, but Tim wouldn't go there, which potentially jeopardized the whole operation. If they didn't get him on tape using those words, they potentially couldn't charge him with anything. But then, according to Red, as he was leaving, we got about 15 or 20 feet away from each other, and he turned back to me and he goes, just to clarify, just so you know, I do want her dead. Those were the words that he needed to hear because again, as we we all now know, Red was an undercover cop who was recording the whole thing. And so with that on tape, they had everything they needed. Tim was arrested in the parking lot and charged with the crime. And of course, the question that everyone was asking was, why? Why would the singer of a popular Christian band do something like this? The first thing that sort of came to light was steroids. According to Vice, when police searched Tim's house, they found dozens of vials of steroids as well as related drugs like estrogen blockers. And that became his first line of defense. His lawyer claimed that his thought processes were devastatingly affected by his steroid use. Other people say that roid rage is a myth and that was just an excuse, that he was just trying to blame it on something to get off the hook. And to his credit, in an interview, he later said, "I can't blame any of the hormones on why I chose to do what I did, but I can say there were a lot of things I felt at the time that I definitely would not have felt otherwise." And a few other things came to light as well. Maybe the most interesting one being that Tim had secretly been an atheist for years, even as I Lay Dying was still marketed as a Christian band. As he put it in an interview, a lot of Christian parents said, "Yes, you can buy this As I Lay Dying CD because they're a Christian band. We toured with more quote-unquote Christian bands who aren't actually Christians than bands that are. In 12 years of touring with As I Lay Dying, I would say that maybe 1 in 10 Christian bands we toured with were actually Christian bands." And so you add all of that up and it painted this kind of shocking picture of someone who had kind of been living this double life of being a fake Christian, who had cheated on his wife, started using steroids, and hid the whole thing from the world. And as far as an explanation for why he did it, well, the way he tells it, he was a desperate man under the influence of drugs who had kind of a momentary lapse of judgment. And on the other hand, the prosecutors in his trial told a very different story of someone who had been plotting this whole thing for weeks or months and would have followed through with it if Red was actually a hitman. And again, I can't say what was actually going on inside his head, only he knows that. But after initially pleading not guilty, Tim eventually gave in, pled guilty, was sentenced to 6 years in state prison, and was released on parole after about 2 years. And so the first question is, what would happen to As I Lay Dying? Well, the remaining members of As I Lay Dying had formed a new band called Woven War with a new vocalist to replace Tim, and it seemed like they were definitely not on great terms with Tim. As I Lay Dying guitarist Nick Hippa wrote a pretty scathing Facebook post about Tim after Tim did an alternative press interview that painted Tim in somewhat of a sympathetic light. Nick said, "Behind the facade of a penitent man with renewed outlook, restored faith, and apparent remorse is a fairly appalling agenda to further damage the lives and reputations of his non-supporters. It is the continued defensive behavior that leveled every facet of an innocent woman's being and traumatized children who have already persevered through the actual pain of an orphan's life." And so it was a bit surprising that after Tim got out of prison, they announced a reunion with the classic lineup of the band in 2018. The band explained that Tim had reached out to them to apologize, and apparently in those conversations, he did enough to convince them that he had changed. As Nick Hippa said,
"When I saw who he was and who he had genuinely become, I let go of that."
And fans seemed ready to put the past behind them as well. Their first reunion show with the classic lineup sold out in 4 minutes, and their 2019 comeback album, Shaped by Fire, got great reviews and was widely considered to be among their very best material. With all of that being said, behind the scenes, something was clearly not right. In 2021, Nick Hippa announced that he had left the band, followed by bassist Josh Gilbert and drummer Jordan Mancino earlier this year, leaving Tim Lambesis as the only original member of As I Lay Dying. And so that leaves us with a lot of questions. And to me, the most interesting part of this whole conversation is how we should feel about all of this, and specifically, should Tim be forgiven for what he did? On the one hand, the stance of most As I Lay Dying fans seems to be that Tim did his time, he paid his debt to society, he's apologized, seems to be a different man now, and that's that. They'll also point to a lot of the charity work that he's done as evidence that he's a changed man. And so in their view, why continue to rake Tim over the coals for this? Once he's done his time, that should be the end of the conversation, right? But on the other hand, there are also the people who say that yes, he did his time, but that doesn't change what he did or the lasting consequences of it. Those people would say, yeah, maybe he is genuinely remorseful about what he did, but that doesn't make it go away. They would say that his ex-wife and children still have to live with the trauma of knowing that the man they called their father or husband tried to have her killed. And there's another even larger conversation to be had of, are we too quick to forgive people for doing terrible things just because we like their art? For example, how many times do we essentially let somebody off the hook just because they're good at music or sports? And would we be so quick to forgive that same person if they did it to our family member, or if they were just a regular civilian who drove a truck or worked at 7-Eleven? Or do we hold people in entertainment to a lower standard? I will let you answer those questions for yourself. All right, my friends, that does it for this video. As always, let me know what you think in the comments. Also, I would like to thank everyone who supports me on Patreon, especially those of you who support at the True Cult level or above. Patrons get all my podcasts early. I do giveaways. There are members only channels in my Discord that I'm super active in. And there's a way to have me review your music or artwork or anything else you want to get my eyes or ears on. Every month, I do a call for submissions. If you want me to review something, all you need to do is drop it in the comments of that post. Then I will review it live on Twitch and post it on Patreon for everyone else to see. So if that sounds cool to you, hit the link in the description of this video. And with that, I'm going to sign off for now, but I will see you next time.